So our next session is titled Women in Business, and our panel is going to be discussing what support there is for women in business and what further support we can give, specifically exploring the challenges and barriers women face and looking at ways we all can support women. So I'd like to welcome our panellists. We've got Henrietta Brealey, CEO of Greater Birmingham Chamber of Commerce, Tracy Black, Chief Strategy Officer at CBI, and Carmen Watson, Chairperson of Pertemps Network Group. Give them a round of applause while they come down. Hi. Hi. Hello. How was your day? Okay, we'll start. If you just introduce yourself from this way.
Morning, everybody. My name's Tracy Black, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at the Confederation of British Industry. We are the main business voice for UK businesses, representing over 170,000 companies. I actually started my career in financial services, and I've worked at places such as UBS on the trading floor, Goldman Sachs, and I've done quite a lot with university spin-outs and sort of tech. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I'm Henrietta Brealey and I'm Chief Exec of the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce. We're a mid-sized not-for-profit that's here to unleash the potential of Greater Birmingham's businesses, helping them with everything from sort of peer learning, expert advice and guidance, growing their profiles and networks, through to trading internationally. I started as an intern about 12 years ago now, I think, and became Chief Executive almost 3 years ago now. So I've been growing up in the business.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Happy International Women's Day. I'm Carmen Watson. My main job in life is to chair a multinational recruitment company. We are based here in the Midlands, but we also have strategic locations up and down the country. When I'm not doing that, I sit on various subsidiary boards. I sit on the race leadership team for business in the community, and I'm also a deputy lieutenant for the West Midlands area.
Amazing. Thank you for coming today. I want to go straight in with more like the problem, and then we talk through kind of solutions. So in all your experiences, what would you say are the primary barriers and challenges that women face within business, and like how can organisations, policies and people collaboratively mitigate the obstacles that you've experienced?
I'm happy to jump in on that. I'll pick up on three, which are firstly cost of childcare and impact that has on retention of women in the workplace. Obviously, it impacts society as a whole, but disproportionately does impact women. Hands up if you've noticed rising cost of childcare over recent years. If that's impacted you. I think there's some great stats from. There's a couple up there, I think. There's some great stats from Pregnant and Screwed, fantastic lobbying organisation for rights of parents. That something like 2/3 of parents have had to cut back on hours or step back from the workforce entirely as a result of cost of childcare and managing those costs. That is a real issue. Like I say, not just for women, but also for labour market. We're in a tight labour market, overall productivity of the UK. Linked to that then is the importance of flexibility in the workplace, which actually there's been some real progress on as a result of COVID, but the need to make sure we keep driving greater flexibility to respect the fact that actually the school day doesn't reflect the working day. And if you want to support the development of parents of any gender, but like I say, disproportionately women, you've got the sort of resources and the structures in place to allow for things like flexible working. There are some brilliant examples around the city of job share at senior level, part-time working at senior level, schemes that encourage returners and support their ongoing development. So lots there. And the last piece actually touched on by the last panel is the importance of networks and access. So has anyone heard of the Gender Pay Index?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. The Gender Index full stop, I should say. So there's Gender Pay Gap, Gender Index. Gender Index is a really great resource that I can recommend looking at for good stats on everything from business ownership through to investment in female-led enterprises. And you can see in the stats that around 20% of enterprises in the UK are now headed up by women. So 1 in 5, it's an improvement, but obviously it's still way to go. West Midlands is actually top of that tree by about 0.2 of a percentage. But then when you look at investment in female-led enterprises, Doesn't matter if you're looking at private equity, venture capital, angel investment, business-led investment. It's between 4 and 6% of investments go to female-led enterprises. So you can see there is a great big gap there. So more to do both in terms of understanding the why, but also building those networks and access for female-led enterprises to those who can invest in their business. I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Thanks. So look, quite a lot of good topics there. I think the access to finance is a really critical one, but we are beginning to see change. So the Department for Business and Trade has put in the Investing in Women's Code. There's now over 200 signatories on that. And what it is financial institutions specifically focusing on how can they make access to finance easier for women, understand women's needs. And there's sort of a selfish reason in this, that we've now sort of recognised that there's a huge amount of money on the table that governments and economies are missing out on. The OECD estimates it was worth about $1.7 trillion globally to the markets, and it would unlock about $5 to $6 trillion of investment and growth. So there's a huge opportunity there, and that is why I think at last companies and business and banks are beginning to realise that actually if we tap into this talent, there's a huge opportunity. We've talked a lot about access to markets and networks. One of the things I really found when I was working in the banks was a lot of the really good insight, the learnings of what was going on the trading floor actually happened after work, in the pubs, ad hoc dinners happening. And actually, it was quite hard for my colleagues to say to me, oh, Tracy, do you want to grab a drink? Do you want to go out for dinner? Because the fact is, innuendos would be made, eyebrows would be raised. And therefore, I think there's a real onus on companies thinking about how can we create more formal, informal opportunities within companies to allow that sort of deepening of relationships. The more you know each other, the closer your relationships are with your colleagues, the more you can learn. And I say, when I did go down to the pub, the barriers sort of went away. So you'd be standing, listening to conversations with the managing directors. You'd hear things that you wouldn't necessarily hear in a formal meeting. The other thing we started doing was tech is a great enabler as well. So we ran sort of scanning over email, and we could see where the networks were. You could see which departments were talking, which teams were talking, but more importantly, you could see where the gaps were. So we started looking at, well, let's bring those people together because they should be talking. So actually just the company empowering people really helped rather than leaving it on individuals, because it's great for the extroverts, but the reality is there's a lot of people, as the earlier session said, it might not come naturally to them. So a little bit of support and nudge can go a long way. And then the last thing I'd say is about language. In business, every sector has its own language. Banking is terrible for its acronyms. You go into government, it's got acronyms. Finance in particular has acronyms, and particularly in entrepreneurship. And I worked for a company that did university spin-out. And I sat there and I was just like, what are they talking about? You know, Series A's, Series B's. So there's definitely, at some point, men learn this. I don't know when and how, but they just seem to have it. So again, I think that education earlier at school, in college and university, of just teaching business language, entrepreneurship, so that when you are in the situation where you're maybe looking to raise money, you feel comfortable because you actually know what they're talking about in the room. Simple things can go really far.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yes, the only thing I wanted to add to this, and hopefully I'm not repeating something Henrietta said, but the Federation of Small Businesses, I don't know whether you refer to that, they do a lot more than just networking, helping with networking now. They offer tailored programmes to help people put things like funding business cases together, because I do think that's one of the areas that women perhaps are less confident about than men. You know, they believe that they have the opportunity to do a business, but the actual presenting of that case and de-risking it, you know, given that they might go off, have children and so on, I think they can help support that. And also, I think not to forget some of those other women-focused accelerators like Blooming Foundations and Albright, who also stand in a room to help with that journey. And I think to your point, Tracy, we still have today that men do business on the golf course kind of mentality. So I think your point around businesses creating opportunities for women to join conversations, meaningful conversations that they wouldn't ordinarily be part of, is crucial.
Yeah. And on those challenges, what would you all say? Sorry, I've got don't worry. What resources do you feel like there are available for women in business to discuss those challenges that we discussed? So, for example, access to funding that you mentioned, or networking, or even like mentorship, or like the innuendos in the office. What resources would you say are available, or potentially what resources would you want to see implemented in corporations?
I think a lot of it was touched on in the first session. I think mentoring is hugely important. I've been mentoring for the last 20 years, twofold. One with businesses who appreciate that there is a problem, and they look at their data and they think, we don't have enough women, and can you help us with this, particularly in certain sectors? I'll call them out: finance, construction, STEM. And we've seen that through working in a mentoring capacity with those organisations, we have shifted a 3% female representation to 36%. So, there are organisations that are doing things really, really well. And I think it's been through working together and exploring the opportunities that's helped us to get there. On the other side of the fence, for the last 20 years, I have been mentoring both young people that are coming out of school or colleges or universities into their entry-level positions, but also I've spent probably about 15 years mentoring women who are in mid-management roles and really struggling to get to that next senior level post. And what I hear from them in that is really, it is all about what are the rules of the game. We've got these fantastic policies, they're legal. Some of them go beyond legality and, spend time publishing them and, sharing best practice. But women still need to know the rules of the game. What is it that I need to be doing before I go through these formal processes? How did you get your role? How did you, get into those boardroom positions? So, again, I think it comes back down to the confidence. I think it comes around to the networking and being in the right rooms. I also heard this morning about sponsor. I would not be where I am today without having a sponsor. My sponsor was male. I actually feel he was more of a tormentor than a mentor because he was brutal, and I often found myself saying, don't worry, I could cry and speak at the same time, because it could be quite devastating. But he was the one that spoke about me when I wasn't in the room, promoted me into those stretch assignments so that I could prove my capability. And those are the things that I now spend time doing with our workforce. So that has led to us having currently 30% on our top co board. If I go the board below that, the executive management board, which is the succession to Topco, we're at 41%. And if I go even further back than that to our operations board, we're at 54%, which I think is really encouraging because it's showing that we are bringing these women through. And it's the kind of things we've spoken about this morning that are achieving that.
Yeah, amazing. Henrietta.
And to add to that on the resources available, so the good news is there's tons. So if you haven't already had a look around the exhibition downstairs, definitely do. There's some brilliant organisations there. Nationally, I'd particularly like to highlight the work from NatWest following the Rose Review on women's entrepreneurship. I'm not going to talk about how I feel about Nigel Farage toppling Alison Rose. That's probably one for another day. But the resources that are available on their Women in Business Hub are brilliant for signposting to all sorts of different things: networks, guides, information, intelligence. They've got their sort of incubator programs as well. In the region, we work at the Chamber with NatWest on a Women Entrepreneurs Investment Competition to support with that access to VC and angel networks and investment, and sort of build the profile of women-led businesses in the region. Again, within the Chamber, we have something called the Future Faces Chamber of Commerce for Early Career Professionals, where our members are able to be matched with a mentor. We've got about 130 young professionals and 130 mentors matched over the last 18 months, and the feedback has just been awesome for the impact it's had on the young professionals' career development. I'm personally only doing my job thanks to a mentor back when I was at university, introducing me to a former manager, so really can't back Carmen's and the previous panel's comments enough on the importance of mentoring. Other bits, we run an SME academy, so you can work in a cohort of businesses on getting up to speed on the essentials around business. I mean, there's so much out there. It's really sort of find your thing. What is it you're looking for? Are you looking for a network of peers? Are you looking for development in a particular area of your business or your professional journey? And go out, get stuck in, get involved, because there is a lot out there.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that was just the bit I wanted to add is, and it's maybe controversial, and it's like, the reality is there is lots of resource. You only need to spend 5 minutes on the internet. I rechecked last night and how much is there. But I do think sometimes, so look, there's an absolute fantastic role that the women networks play, but you've also got to think about who are your customers, who are your stakeholders, who are you engaged with, and the reality is half the population is male. Mm-hmm. Most of your customers, at the moment, you will find most of the leaders are probably male. Mm-hmm. A lot of businesses are B2B, not B2C, but your customers will also be male. So I think it's really important when you're looking at networks that you look at the cross spectrum. For herself, Keith Anderson, who's the chair or CEO of Scottish Power, is really passionate about diversity and inclusion. He's done a lot to encourage it, but he was still struggling to get enough women to come through his organisation, to come up to top, and he wanted to understand why. So we created a senior leaders network in Scotland, and it was specifically not a women-to-women mentoring network. Mm-hmm. It was about having Scotland's top CEOs, male or female, mentoring women to try and understand, and these were women with quite a lot of experience who were probably one level down from an exec level, wanting to get onto board positions, and try and find out why weren't they applying, why weren't they putting themselves forward. And I think the thing that came back that was most shocking, particularly from the male CEOs when they were mentoring these women, was the fact that they had all the skills. They had great jobs. They had huge amount of experience. But even though they had all that and they were maybe 45 years old, they still had a lack of confidence. Mm-hmm. And just by having 3 or 4 conversations a year and that individual saying, stop being an idiot, of course you can do that job, put yourself forward to it, made all the difference. Sometimes like just a little nudge can have a profound impact. So there's great programs by the LSE. Most of your universities will run great entrepreneurship courses, and the results speak for themselves. The Goldman Sachs 10,000 business program, companies that go on that generally quadruple their profits, mm-hmm. improve their productivity by 1/3 within 30 months. So I would just sort of say, everything has a role, but you've got to think about who your customers are, who your stakeholders are, and make sure that you're learning that language and understand how those different parties all integrate and how the best communication with them. I think it's really important to remember.
Yeah, for sure. And that pivots really nicely onto our male allies. Obviously, the 2 founders here being male. We've got male people in the audience. In your opinion, all of you, how can male allies advocate? For example, you mentioned, obviously, your sponsor was male. I know in our few previous panels, mentors are male. And what is that importance of them being advocating for women in business?
Can I just touch on a couple of points that Tracy made first? I think when you think about the number of women in those roles and the fact that women make up 85% of consumer decisions, I mean, it's pretty shocking, really, isn't it, that we aren't sitting on the boards of those very companies that we're supporting. So that was the one thing I wanted to say. I think in terms of the male allies, it's hugely important. Look, we're not here today really discussing a women's problem, are we? Well, we are, but we're not.
Not officially.
Because where we want to get to at the end of the day is that women and men are standing shoulder to shoulder, and businesses and communities are thriving. We are not going to do that unless we get women up to that level in the first place, and then we move forward together. Mm-hmm. So certainly the men that I have come across that have been hugely helpful in shifting the dial. They have been men that have taken an interest in women. They've looked to understand women. Not necessarily the women they're married to, but the women that they work with. And there's a really good book, actually, Invisible Women by Caroline Perez. And she talks about, how the world was created by men for men and how all these hidden barriers really do have a profound effect on women. So I think for men, it's about trying at least to understand women. And mentorship programs do have, the young lady who was on earlier, I thought put it Christina, I thought she put it so well when she talked about her reverse mentoring, because really she was educating him upwards. So I think it starts with education, then it's the advocacy. It really is about how they position, how they support, how they profile women, and how they, stand hand in hand and drive forward with them.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, I suppose. First thing is, don't leave it to women to fix the problem or challenge the unfairness. I asked Matthew, who's our Director of People and Skills, before I came, how I should think about this question. He said, it would be great if you had a really good anecdote of when you've really seen sort of a man go out of his way. And it was a really sad testament. While I've seen lots of fantastic things at a sort of institutional level, I really struggled to actually come up with when have I really seen an individual put themselves out or themselves at a disadvantage. And I'm sure it has, but I did spend the last 2 days trying to think of it. Unfortunately, I've got loads of anecdotes I could tell you where it went the other way. And I'll share a couple. But one was we were on an offsite in Switzerland, all having a great time. Everybody had far too much to drink. That was the reality. But probably the majority of the men in the room were way more senior than the women. Way more senior. And an incident happened that I got involved in, and it got very aggressive very quickly to the point other men had to intervene when I was stepping in for a young woman. And on the Monday, the right things happened in that I was called into a room by the most senior man in the organisation and said, look, we heard an incident happened on the Saturday night. Do you want to make a complaint? And I said, well, has the young woman who was directly affected making a complaint? And he said, no, she doesn't want to take it any further. But if you want to take it further, we'll support you. Now, on one hand, you could say that is fantastic. There were two other men in the room who were managing directors as well, who were there and actually intervened and pulled this chap off me when he got rather aggressive. And I was young, and I was like, you know what? I just don't want any fuss. It doesn't matter. The person in question, he was drunk, he's apologised, and we left it. But it always niggled me that, should I have done something? And then the penny dropped about 3 years ago, and I was like, for Christ's sake, there were 10, 20 other men there who were way more senior than I was. Why was it up to me to put the complaint in? And I fundamentally believe that if a situation happens, the onus should be on the most senior person in that room to take that complaint forward. But what happens is it's usually the woman, and they're usually a junior woman, who have to hold all that responsibility. And I've seen that too often. The most dangerous thing, though, is the unconscious bias, when they don't even realise. So they would absolutely say they're champions, they're supporters. And I had this hilarious situation where, again, at another bank, a very senior man, I think it was International Women's Day, wanted to speak to the senior leadership, female leadership. So we all trooped into this room. HR's there, he's there, and it's a Q&A session. And this company was amazing. They had creches on site, they had pretty much parity until you got to the most senior level. And everybody wants to become an MD. 80% of the bonus pool in a bank goes to that 20%. That's where you want to be. And there was just a ceiling there. And I've never forgotten this woman putting her hand up and saying, look, can you give us some advice of what it is we need to do so we can have some more women managing directors? And he said, deadpan, he just turned around and went, well, we're a meritocratic organisation, and if you work hard and you put your head down, you'll succeed here. And there was just this sort of silence around the room. Classic woman, we said nothing. It's all stewing. We all left. Because in an instant, he had basically said that every other man in this organisation just basically worked harder and better than we did. And he just didn't even realise that that was what he was saying. He fundamentally believed that if we all worked hard, we would succeed. But if he looked at the data, he would see that there was a fundamental flaw in that argument. Because why was it at the 4 grades before men and women were equal, and in that last final hurdle, it was like 95% men and 5% women. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at the data. And I think that's one of the most important things that I say to companies is track where does it start going wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's not women that have to change. We do not need to work harder or better or smarter. The systems have to change. Yeah. How you interview, how you do progression, all of that needs to be looked at, and just follow the data and you will find your answers. But I hope that's sort of insightful.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that is so powerful.
Yeah,
those examples are just so, how you should take leadership, not put the accountability on women. And I couldn't agree more. And it's changed the system, not the symptom. And what you need for that is that ownership at board level, that adherence to data, like get to the root of it. What is the problem? Like, where are you seeing these ceilings? Where are you seeing these gaps? What then does that look like for your strategy? Is it that you're not getting a diverse enough pool coming in at the ground level? Okay, that's your recruitment strategy. Is it at that top level? Well, what's going wrong in terms of that advocacy, that appointment to getting through that final hurdle? So that's at an organisational level. But for individual men, actually, and again, shout out to the men who have come today and not done what can sometimes happen of, oh, that looks good, I'll send a woman, I'll send a sort of female colleague to come to that. Because actually that first bit of being curious and being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and sort of going, I'm going to listen to this. I might hear some things that actually make me question my own behaviour, but I'm comfortable with that. I'm going to take that challenge. And that piece around the advocacy, like you say, who we like is typically people like us. It's that affinity bias that you hear about all the time. I'm terrible for it, and I've got really good colleagues who'll always be on interview panels with me whenever we're doing any sort of assessment internally to go, come on, are you just suggesting this person because they remind you of you? Usually someone who's young, gobby, articulate, maybe a little bit difficult. Those are sort of the people I'll go, yeah, they're great. And you need that balanced view of colleagues who'll bring different biases to make sure that you're actually challenging yourself there. And going back to sort of data and how people are actually performing, all of that. But for men, I've actually got a positive example of how a male leader has helped me in my career in something that they probably won't even remember doing. So I was 25 when I was appointed Director of Policy at the Chamber. And I probably looked about 17. I'd occasionally get asked if I was doing work experience. I had braces. It was amazing. It was a good look. And I used to go to sort of senior roundtables with, say, the leaders of the financial services sector in the region. And there was one particular one that I remember so vividly. I walked in, all men over 50. Me. There is a sort of, who are you? What are you about? We weren't expecting you. And I won't name him, but there was a brilliant leader sat next to me. He made an active effort to include me in the conversation, to be nice or ask questions. And what do you think, Henrietta? Not in a patronising way, but in a way where I could see they were going, I can see you're a bit nervous. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring you in. Made a huge difference to my confidence. And also at networking events as well. When I used to go to senior level networking events, I had a colleague who, actually for his own reasons, is very sensitive to bias from things he's experienced in his own life, who once turned around to me at a senior level networking event and said, Henrietta, this is so frustrating. You're technically more senior than me, but every single person in this room who's come up to us has introduced themselves to me first, because I'm a middle-aged man and you've had to introduce yourself into the conversation. So just those little bits of thinking when we're out and about, are we doing that? Are we contributing to that? How can we make sure we're including people who perhaps may look a little bit uncomfortable, or like it's sort of, they're new to this whole networking thing, or maybe at an earlier stage of their career, because that really does make such a big difference to an individual's confidence and ability to think, yeah, I can do this, I can keep progressing.
No, amazing for sure. Thank you both. I'm curious, conscious of time, we've only got a few minutes left, but Tracy, your point was very, very powerful, and I kind of want to throw that question back onto you, the question that woman asked and the male managing director didn't answer very, very well. In your opinion, if I was to ask you that question again, for example, you're all very senior women, people that want to get to that executive level, that want to get to that C level in their careers, as women, what advice would you give them? Just on final thoughts.
I do think things have shifted. There's a much greater awareness now by everyone. And when I speak to, I speak to CEOs every day of FTSE companies right down to SMEs, and there's a definite willingness to change. So it is about relying, it all comes down to yourself. There's lots of people who want to help you, but it does come down to yourself. And I have found throughout life that if you ask, you very rarely get a no. Most people want to support you, want you to succeed. So you've got to seek it out. You've got to go and ask for the opportunities. I was very privileged at UBS. I was put forward for the leadership program there, 100 people out of 60,000 people. But I made it really clear that that was an opportunity I was interested in. So I would encourage, no matter how young you are and how scary it is to seek out those people who will get behind you, who will support you. And you can go quite senior. I have people who's, in this day and age, who still will come to me about their son or their daughter, could you help them get work experience? And I'm like, absolutely, but only if they contact me. I'm not going to do it via you. So, but if anybody is bold enough to drop me an email and say, Tracy, could I come and spend an afternoon with you? Could I spend half an hour on a call with you? You'd have to be pretty tough to say no. So that would be my advice, is just keep asking. And also come up with suggestions. We do seem to have got to a society, and I see this a lot, where we seem to be always waiting for somebody else to fix the problem. A lot of executives say that when you know you've got all this talent. So if you're sitting there with your colleagues going, why don't they do this? Or this is really stupid, they should be doing that. Speak up and talk about it. There is this assumption in a lot of organizations that the leadership have all the answers. And actually, I think now we're at a time where there is a lot of empowerment going around. So don't wait, and certainly don't sit in a corner moaning and grumping that this isn't working, but don't tell anyone what your solution is. I'm not interested in just hearing about this isn't working. What I want to hear about is how would you fix it? And that's really important, is to think about the solutions.
Perfect, amazing, thanks. Any final thoughts just on that, with your opinion?
Two very quick ones. Picking up on your comments around just ask. LinkedIn is your friend. If you see things out there where you go, they're doing a really interesting job, I want to know how they got there, reach out and ask. Sometimes people do it to me. I love it. Like you say, it's very flattering. It's nice to be asked. So never be afraid to bother people, ask them, get their advice, grab a coffee. And the other piece is it's not your job to tell you you're not ready. If you see a job where you go, I think that looks pretty good, I'm not sure if I'm ready for it yet, go for it. Like if you're not, then you can get feedback from the interview process, find out how you can develop, etc. But don't rule yourself out before you've even applied. Go for it.
All of the aforementioned, that I would wrap it up under be confident. A lot of people don't apply because they will go through a tick list and go, not sure about that, to Henrietta's point. But I think just be conscious that there's a lot of coding in applications, in assessments and things like that. And it just put women off. Don't let it. Put your imposter syndrome to one side and go.
Thank you very much. Good round of applause, our panel.